I stopped being my girlfriend's alarm clock and accidentally destroyed both our lives. 3 years of morning battles finally came to an explosive end. I, 26, have been in a relationship with my girlfriend, Jess, 28, for 3 years. We met through mutual friends at a local brewery. I was there celebrating a promotion at work, and she was out with her coworkers after finishing a big project. Our friend Tom introduced us, thinking we'd hit it off since we both worked in tech. I'm a software developer at a mid-sized company, while Jess was a UX designer. That night, we talked for hours about everything from our shared love of sci-fi shows to our different approaches to work-life balance. I remember being struck by how energetic and vibrant she was, full of ideas and dreams. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to her mentioning that she was definitely a night owl and how she did her best work after midnight. We moved in together after a year of dating. It seemed like the logical next step. We were spending most nights at each other's places anyway, and it made financial sense in our city's expensive housing market. We found a nice 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, close enough to both our workplaces that the commute wouldn't be too bad for either of us. The first few months of living together were great. We'd cook dinner together, binge-watch shows, and spend weekends exploring the city or hosting game nights with friends. But gradually, our different schedules started causing friction. You see, I've always been an early riser. My dad was in the military, and though he never forced his habits on us, I naturally gravitated toward his routine. By the time I was in college, I was regularly up at 5 a.m., going for runs before my classes. Jess, on the other hand, is not a morning person. And when I say not a morning person, I mean she treats sunrise like it's a personal insult. This is primarily due to the fact that she's up until 2 or 3 a.m. every day on her phone despite having to wake up at 8 a.m. for work. At first, I tried to be understanding. Everyone has different rhythms, right? But it wasn't just about preference, her schedule was actively causing problems in her life. I've tried multiple times to get her to start going to bed earlier so she could wake up on time. I even bought her a fancy sunrise alarm clock for Christmas last year, thinking it might help her transition more naturally. She used it for 2 days before unplugging it and shoving it in the closet, claiming the gradual brightening kept her awake. When I suggested she try adjusting her schedule, she'd get defensive, saying that would leave her no time to do her own things. I need my me time, she'd insist. I can't just work, come home, and go to bed. That's not living. Seeing as she only works until 4 p.m., this argument is patently false. She has plenty of time between getting home and a reasonable bedtime to pursue her interests. But after several heated discussions that went nowhere, I decided not to press the issue. It wasn't worth the fight, and I figured she'd eventually realize on her own that her habits weren't sustainable. Instead, I found myself falling into the role of her personal alarm clock. My daily routine became structured around making sure Jess got up for work on time. I wake up at 5 o'clock, lace up my running shoes, and head out for an hour-long run around the neighborhood. I love this time of day. The streets are quiet, the air is crisp, and I can think clearly without any distractions. Sometimes I see my elderly neighbor, Mr. Johnson, walking his corgi, Max. We exchange nods and brief greetings, both appreciating the peaceful morning solitude. I get home around 6 o'clock, feeling energized and ready for the day. While Jess sleeps on, I shower, taking care not to be too noisy even though I'm pretty sure a marching band couldn't wake her at this point. After my shower, I make breakfast, usually something simple like oatmeal with fruit or whole grain toast with eggs. I eat at my desk in our small home office, catching up on emails and news while enjoying the sunrise through our east-facing windows. Then comes the part of my day I've grown to dread, waking Jess up. I start the process at around 7:30, giving her plenty of time to get ready for work. I've developed what I call the gradual awakening protocol, a careful, multi-step process that would probably be funny if it weren't so frustrating. Step 1. Light adjustment. I begin by turning on her bedside lamp, which has a dimmer switch. I start at the lowest setting and gradually increase it over about 5 minutes. Usually, this gets no response beyond her pulling the covers over her head. Step 2. Gentle verbal encouragement. Jess, honey, it's time to wake up, I'll say softly. You need to start getting ready for work. This typically earns me a groan and possibly a pillow thrown in my general direction. Step 3. Physical contact. A light touch on the shoulder, maybe rubbing her back a bit. This is where things start to get dicey. Jess in the morning is like dealing with a cranky bear coming out of hibernation, unpredictable and potentially hostile. If I'm lucky, she'll stumble to the bathroom at this point. But my job isn't done. No, because 9 times out of 10, I'll go back to the bedroom to find her asleep again, often in some impossibly uncomfortable looking position half sitting against the headboard. The worst part about this whole process isn't the time it takes or the repetition, it's her attitude. Jess is downright mean in the morning. She'll use expletives that would make a sailor blush, all directed at me. "Fuck off," is her usual greeting, often accompanied by a glare that could curdle milk. Sometimes she gets creative with her insults, telling me I'm worse than Monday mornings or that my voice is like nails on the chalkboard of her soul. When I try to discuss this with her later, when she's fully awake and supposedly rational, she just brushes it off. "I was sleepy and out of it. What do you want me to do?" She'll say, as if being tired gives her a free pass to treat me like garbage. She never apologizes, never acknowledges how her behavior affects me. It's just expected that I'll take the abuse and come back the next morning for more. Our friends have noticed the toll this is taking on our relationship. Last month, during our regular Sunday brunch with our friends Sarah and Mike, Sarah pulled me aside while Jess was in the bathroom. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "You seem tired. And not just physically." I tried to laugh it off, but Sarah wasn't having it. She reminded me that relationships should be partnerships, not one person constantly caretaking the other. Mike, who's known Jess since college, added his 2 cents later, telling me that she's always been like this and that her last relationship ended partly because of her morning attitude. Still, I kept at it. I told myself it was just a quirk, that relationships require compromise, that I was being helpful. But last Friday, she pushed things too far. I was going through the usual morning routine. She had actually made it to the bathroom on the first try, which I thought was progress. But as she walked past me, she made this exaggerated dry heaving sound, like she was about to vomit. Then she said, with as much disgust as she could muster, "You fucking smell. Take a shower." Now, I need to emphasize something here. I had already taken a shower after my run, as I do every morning. I use good quality soap and deodorant. I'm actually quite particular about my hygiene, another habit from my dad. The accusation was not only false but deliberately hurtful. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not in a dramatic, shouting way, but in a quiet, final way. I realized I was done. Done being her punching bag, done enabling her terrible habits, done sacrificing my own mental well-being for someone who couldn't even show basic respect. I went about my day as usual, but that evening, when we were both home from work, I told her that our deal with me waking her up every day was over. I was calm but firm as I explained that I was done with her tantrums, done with her insults, and done with her frankly stupid facial expressions with how out of it she was. I told her that I'm not moving a finger to make sure she gets up for work on time anymore. Jess didn't take it well. First, she tried to play it off as a joke, saying I was being too sensitive. When she realized I was serious, she switched to guilt tripping, reminding me how she needs me to wake her up, how she might lose her job without me. I stood my ground, telling her she's an adult and can wake herself up. The weekend was tense. Jess alternated between giving me the silent treatment and making passive-aggressive comments about how some people don't understand the concept of helping their partners. She made a big show of setting multiple alarms on her phone for Monday morning, slamming things around as she did so. I didn't sleep well Sunday night, partly because I could hear her still awake and moving around at 1 a.m., and partly because I was anxious about how Monday would go. But I stuck to my decision. When my alarm went off at 5 o'clock, I got up and went about my morning routine as usual, ignoring the cocoon of blankets that was Jess. I left for work at my usual time, noticing that she was still sound asleep despite her phone occasionally buzzing with alarms. Part of me wanted to wake her, but I reminded myself that this was her responsibility now. Around 10 a.m., I got a text from our neighbor, Lisa, asking if everything was okay. Apparently, she'd heard a lot of swearing and running around from our apartment around 9:30. I didn't respond. At noon, my phone rang. It was Jess, and she was nearly incoherent with rage. Between her yelling and crying, I managed to piece together what had happened. She had overslept and was over an hour late to work. Since she had already been written up twice during her probationary period for tardiness, this was an automatic firing according to company policy. I tried to get a word in, to maybe suggest that this could be a wake-up call, pun not intended, about her habits, but she wasn't having it. According to her, this was entirely my fault. I had sabotaged her by not waking her up. After a few minutes of this, I had to hang up on her to get back to work. When I got home that evening, things really hit the fan. Jess was waiting for me, still in her pajamas, looking like she hadn't moved from the couch all day. Empty snack bags and energy drink cans surrounded her like some kind of processed food nest. As soon as I walked in, she started shrieking at me again. "You ruined everything," she yelled, gesturing wildly with a half-eaten bag of chips. "I loved that job. do you know how hard it is to find a good position in UX design? And you just had to teach me some stupid lesson. I tried to stay calm, reminding her that she was responsible for her own actions and that I had given her fair warning. This only seemed to enrage her more. Fair warning? Fair warning would have been gradually reducing how much you helped me wake up, not going cold turkey. And now what am I supposed to do? I have bills to pay. That's when she dropped the bombshell demand. She wanted half my salary until she found a better job. Not just any job, mind you, but one that met her standards and paid what she thought she deserved. When I pointed out how ridiculous this was, she actually stamped her foot like a toddler throwing a tantrum. It's the least you can do after getting me fired, she insisted. I wouldn't be in this situation if it wasn't for you. I retreated to our home office, locking the door behind me as she continued to rant. As I sat there, listening to her alternate between crying and yelling, I couldn't help but think about how we got here. How did I end up feeling responsible for a grown woman's inability to wake up on time? When did I become not just a boyfriend, but an enabler? Our lease isn't up for another 4 months, and neither of us can afford to break it. So now we're stuck in this awkward limbo. Jess spends most of her time on the couch, staying up even later than before since she doesn't have to wake up for work. She applies to jobs half-heartedly during the day, but I've noticed she's only looking at positions that have flexible hours or work-from-home options. I've started spending more time at the office or at the local library, coming home only to sleep. When I am home, Jess alternates between trying to guilt me into giving her money and ignoring me completely. She's told all our mutual friends that I got her fired out of spite, and some of them have actually taken her side. Sarah, thankfully, has been supportive, reminding me that Jess's inability to adult isn't my responsibility. I feel conflicted about the whole situation. Part of me wonders if I should have tried a more gradual approach, maybe given her a week's notice or helped her find alternative ways to wake up. But another part of me knows that this was probably inevitable. You can only enable someone's bad habits for so long before something has to give. My dad, when I finally told him what was going on, just sighed and said, "Son, you can't care more about someone's life than they do." I think he's right, but it doesn't make the situation any easier. Looking back, I realized there were red flags I ignored. Like how she lost her previous job for similar reasons but blamed it on an unfair manager. Or how she always had excuses for why she couldn't use any of the various alarm clocks or apps I suggested. I was so focused on being supportive that I didn't see I was actually preventing her from facing the consequences of her actions. Some of our friends have suggested couples counseling, but I'm not sure that's the answer. This isn't just about our different sleep schedules, it's about basic respect and responsibility. I shouldn't have to attend therapy sessions to convince my girlfriend not to insult me for trying to help her. For now, I'm taking things day by day. I've started looking at apartment listings, just in case. I'm not ready to end the relationship yet, but I'm also not willing to go back to being her human alarm clock. Maybe this will be the wake-up call she needs to make some changes in her life. Or maybe it'll be the thing that finally makes us both realize we're not as compatible as we thought. I do know one thing for certain, I don't miss those morning battles. My runs are more enjoyable now that I'm not dreading what comes after. And if that makes me selfish, well, I can live with that. After all, I'm awake to enjoy it.